Good evening, and thank you all for coming to our program this evening. My name is Mark Polcha, and I'm the Vice President of Community Service and PACE for the National Society of Collegiate Scholars here at Robert Morris. Every spring, NSCS hosts a program for its members known as the Last Lecture. Many of you may be familiar with this program after Randy Pausch delivered an emotional last lecture at Carnegie Mellon that captured the hearts of America in 2007. Over the past couple years, we've had the privilege to hear lectures from our favorite faculty and Rooney scholars. Tonight, it is my honor to introduce our guest lecturer, President Gregory Dell'omo, who will present his final lecture, or as he jokes, his first one here on campus. Since arriving in 2005, President Dell'omo has drastically changed the perception of this institution. In the 2007 strategic plan, the university introduced its 6 core values of academic excellence, professional focus, engaged learning, global perspective, individuals matter, and changing lives. During his tenure, no one has emphasized, encouraged, or embellished these 6 core values more than President Dell'omo. RMU has experienced an 18% increase in undergraduate enrollment while Dell'omo has been president. With the number of students living on campus, now nearly 60% of undergraduate students having more than doubled since he got here. RMU now offers 20 online degree programs and certificate programs, with approximately 620 students enrolled in online programs. President Dell'omo has overseen a transformation of RMU's campus, which includes the construction of new buildings for the School of Business and School of Communications and Information Systems, new residence halls, new and updated dining and recreational facilities, and a nursing simulation laboratory set to open in the fall. Also, another highlight is something about a left turn lane onto campus, but I don't know what that is. President Dell'omo sits on the boards of the Women McGee's Hospital Foundation, Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra, and the Pennsylvania Economy League of Southwestern Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania Campus Compact. He is the chair of the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities of Pennsylvania and a member of the President's Council of the Pittsburgh Council on Higher Education. For our last lecture series, we give our guests the option to lecture on any topic they wish. President Dell'omo has decided to give his lecture on what I've experienced and learned as president of RMU for the past 10 years. It is my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce President Gregory Dell'omo.
Well, I have to start off by saying I'm going to apologize because my allergies have kicked in, so I'm starting to lose my voice. So hopefully I'll be able to go all the way through this, and there might be a few cracks here and there, but bear with me. And I really want to thank everyone for coming today. The last lecture does have an ominous sound to it, so Randy Pausch obviously did a wonderful job, and believe me, don't hold me up to that standard, but I'm very honored to be here, and I really want to thank the National Society of Collegiate Scholars for inviting me to give this lecture. It was actually rather fun to put it together. Now, when I was first asked to do this, I really had no idea what to talk about. And shortly thereafter, I was also asked to be this year's commencement speaker at the undergraduate ceremony on May 9th. And so now I had 3 challenges facing me at that point in time. What would I present for my last lecture? What would be my remarks at the commencement? And how do I make them different enough so not to bore everybody twice? Though I can assure you my remarks tonight will be a little bit longer than my commencement speech. And so if you go to commencement, you'll be able to sit back and hopefully it'll go through rather quickly. After a lot of thought, I came up with 2 ideas which cover the things I feel very important about and I hope are interesting to everyone. They're different enough to have some overlap, though not where I think you'll feel you're hearing the same presentation twice for the seniors in the audience. So for my last lecture, as was said in my introduction, I want to talk about what I've experienced and learned as president at Robert Morris University for the past 10 years. And that's as a first presidency, my only presidency, I think there's some very interesting aspects of those 10 years. Usually, by the time I get done with it, you're probably going to figure out, why the hell does anybody want to be a university president? But don't let me jump ahead too far. But I'm going to violate one of the key rules of giving a lecture. And I'm actually going to give you the ending first. That way you can leave early if you want. But this will be my overall conclusion, what it's like being a university president. And it actually has 2 parts to it. And so let me start with the first part. The first part is being a university president, particularly in today's environment, is probably one of the most difficult, challenging, demanding, complex time-consuming, draining, and at times one of the most frustrating jobs one can imagine. The job calls for an unbelievable and unrealistic set of skills for an individual to possess if he or she expects to have any success, not to mention even making it through a presidential search committee. A number of former presidents have observed the wide range of personal qualities one needs to be considered the ideal university president, many of which may appear to be tongue-in-cheek, but there's a fair amount of truth underlying each and every one. These important qualities include having the iron endurance of Cal Ripken. Does everybody remember Cal Ripken in this room? Okay. Cal Ripken, the physical charm of a Greek athlete, the wisdom of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle all rolled into one, the intellect of Albert Einstein, the cunning of Machiavelli, the money sense of J.P. Morgan, the inventiveness of Steve Jobs, the courage of a lion, the skin of a rhino, the stomach of a goat, the spontaneous rhetorical ability of Winston Churchill, the diplomacy of Thomas Jefferson, the ability of Harry Houdini to get out of tight situations, the conciliatory powers of Abraham Lincoln, the storytelling talent of Stephen King, the self-confidence of Donald Trump, or state it more accurately, the innate ability to create one's own delusional sense of reality, the loving kindness of Mother Teresa, the virtue above suspicion of Caesar's wife, and the luck of the Irish, and the patience of Job. So how am I doing? Some have even expounded these qualities by stating that university presidents are better thought of as King Solomon, determining how to divide the baby. Presidents behave most days as 19th century political ward bosses, rationing funds and dispensing favors while working to manage an enterprise run by faculty, operating like medieval craft guilds, and a large, unwieldy, archaic volunteer governing board further confuses the job. Others have pointed out that being a university president requires far more skill than being a CEO. Corporate CEOs have much more direct power and control over those who work for them. What you say goes in that world, as long as you don't irritate your board of directors. But being an effective university president, however, involves much more diplomacy, persuasion, and vision selling, not to mention a lot more biting of one's tongue. Yes, presidents are beholden to a board, but they have to lead through collaboration and cajoling, not control. This is the most evident when you consider the long-held tradition of academic freedom and its relationship to tenured faculty, making them a powerful group within a university governance system. As one college president once said, you don't say, Professor Smith, I need you to make this change. Instead, you say, Professor Smith, I have a great idea I'd like to run by you. I really need your input in order to make this work. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about how to improve my idea and how to implement it. Now, can you imagine Steve Jobs saying that? Brilliant as he was, he'd last about 8 nanoseconds as a university president. Not only does the university president need to persuade and cajole a bunch of people internally, he or she needs to convince others outside the university to contribute millions and millions of dollars. So, to put it all in context, we're simply expected to walk on water. And by the way, university presidencies typically last less than 7 years on average. Go figure. Now, after hearing all this, you're probably wondering why in the world anyone would want to become a university president. And so what could be the second part of my overview of what it's like to be a university president, particularly at Robert Morris University? Well, the second part is, while there is a great deal of truth to what I just outlined regarding the roles and expectations of a university president, for me, being president of Robert Morris University has been the most important, exciting, enriching, energizing, personally fulfilling, rewarding, meaningful, and most of all, fun job I've ever had. At a very high level, it is a true honor to hold the position of university president. Universities are one of the most unique and noble institutions left in our global society. American higher education is still widely respected and emulated throughout the world. And although there are numerous challenges to our current model of higher education, and changes have and will always be needed in order to allow universities to continually be highly effective, relevant, accountable, and accessible in a constantly changing world, the fundamental principles underlying higher education still apply. There's a reason why the modern university has been around for more than 900 years. And that's because a community of people observing, questioning, thinking, challenging, creating, learning, sharing, and debating new ideas related to all matters impacting on the world around us and beyond serves as a powerful and effective way for humans to continue to evolve intellectually, socially, and economically. As president, I've had the opportunity to meet interesting people, work with very talented and dedicated colleagues, promote big ideas, and affect the lives of countless students. I've watched the students and families live dreams that are limited only by their imaginations, and college remains that one special place where dreams still matter. I've always tried to see myself as holding a title to a tradition as well as a job. This means that I've always tried to focus my actions on the vision, core values, and strategies of Robert Morris University, and not just my personal interests and passions, although that's kind of hard to do sometimes. This has allowed me to view the benefits of leading this university as always being greater, much greater than the cost of doing it. Over the course of the 10 years in which I've had the privilege of serving as president, I feel that I've gained valuable experiences and insights through the ups and downs of the job, grew in the job both personally and professionally, witnessed the growth and success of the university with the guidance, help, and support of many people and partners. And I leave with the satisfaction of knowing that there's a strong foundation upon which RMU will continue to be successful in the future. But now let me back up a little bit and let me offer a few specific experiences that I've had at RMU. And let me go back to the very, very beginning. The first time I set foot on the campus in Moon Township was April 1st, 2005, April Fool's Day, when I came for my initial interview. And Senior Vice President for Business Affairs, Dan Keener, picked me up at the airport and drove me to the campus. Now, I must say, driving down University Boulevard was not the best first impression one would hope for, and I started to have serious doubts before I even got to campus. Dan must have seen the look on my face because he did his best to acknowledge my concerns and to reassure me that things were in transition. His attempt was valiant, but not very effective. But then, we turned onto campus, drove up Campus Drive, stopped at the top of the hill, and all my doubts subsided. Having just driven up the tree-lined street, we passed the newly completed Joe Walton Stadium to my left, and then we stopped at the intersection beyond Sewell, and I saw the full campus with the rolling hills, the Nicholson Center with the vast green lawn in front, the Regal Chapel up on the hill, Concord was under construction, the soccer fields were up to the upper left, and there was land, and more land. I remember that moment like it was yesterday, and I must say that I was shocked because I did not expect to see a beautiful suburban campus tucked behind the hillside off University Boulevard. And my first thought was, wow, this is the kind of campus I can see myself enjoying, and I could do a lot with all this land. They say that university presidents are not happy unless they are building something on their campuses. There's a fair amount of truth to that. You see, I came from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, which is a beautiful older campus with all the historic stone Gothic buildings situated in a really diverse city suburban environment, with half the campus in West Philly and the other half in Lower Marion Township, which is the beginning of what is known as the Philadelphia Main Line, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. SJU, St. Joe's, had a great campus with one major problem. It was landlocked, meaning that it had no land to grow unless it bought private homes contiguous to the campus, and this would be very, very expensive and extremely controversial. This really was very frustrating, the university's attempts to grow its programs, residence halls, athletic fields, et cetera. It was a major strategic liability. But now I saw a campus where I could possibly be the next president, and I immediately knew it offered tremendous growth opportunities, even before I really knew much about RMU and the direction it was heading. The job prospects were starting to look more and more promising with each turn as we made our way through the campus on our way to the ferry room in Massey Hall for my first interview with the Presidential Search Committee. Though I think I probably blinked when I went past Gallatin because I just missed this natural beauty and I didn't see it the first time. The Presidential Search Committee, and this is probably relevant because we're going to go through this process right now, but the Presidential Search Committee consisted of all board members, probably around 15 or so, I can't remember, and one faculty member, Professor Tom Marshall, who has since passed away. Many of you may remember Tom. He was a real leader on the campus. The interview lasted about 2 hours, and the board members peppered me with a whole series of questions. I remember that as the interview was being concluded and we were getting ready to break up, someone realized that they never allowed me to ask any questions. So with a minute or two left, they asked, "So Greg, do you have any questions?" Well, I actually had about 1 million questions, but under the pressure, the first thing that came to my mind was the question, why is the university's endowment so low? And at that time, the university's endowment was a little bit below $16 million. And I think this very direct and rather blunt question might have caught some of the board members off guard and actually caught some was off-putting to some of the board members. But given the limited time that I had, this was the one issue that never came up in the questioning before me, and it was the first thing that popped into my mind. This was very interesting. Two of the board members, one being the board chair and the other being the board vice chair, answered the question with two very different answers, which I found very interesting, but also quite telling at the time. The vice chair answered first, and his response was that the university didn't believe in endowments because it operated on the philosophy that you pay as you go. The thinking being that this forces the university to spend only what it has in its annual revenue, and this results in a disciplined and efficient operation. Conversely, if you have a large endowment, it promotes irresponsible growth that leads to inefficiencies and overspending. Less disciplined financial management that lets costs get out of hand. Okay? As soon as that individual ended, the board chair, who was literally sitting across the table, it felt like it was, GM and the auto workers. And the board chair immediately responded by saying, first of all, he didn't agree at all with what was just stated, actually pointing to his colleague. And he felt that the growth of an endowment for a university is critically important, and this is an area that RMU needs to do better in the future. He went on to say that an endowment allows the university to invest responsibly in its future growth and the quality of its education it delivers. Strong endowments also help institutions to weather periodic downturns in enrollment, as well as help fund institutional aid for student scholarships. After hearing these two diametrically opposed views from two of the board leaders, my thoughts were, wow, this is very interesting, but also somewhat disturbing. Disagreements of this magnitude and importance hardly ever surface during one's initial interview, especially in such a dramatic fashion involving two of the leaders of the Board of Trustees. So what was my response? I only had a few seconds left, and I simply said, I agree with him, the board director, the chair of the board. I said, I agree with him for the reasons that he stated so eloquently. I also went on to explain that endowments are crucial to the long-term success of a university because of the fundamental challenges inherent in the economic model associated with higher education in our country. That ended the interview, and I must say that I didn't feel the interview went very well. It raised more questions for me than it answered. I should also admit, and my family will remember this, that I could have done a better job resting up for the interview. The night before, I went to the NIT championship game at Madison Square Garden in New York City, where St. Joseph's University was playing the University of South Carolina in the championship, and St. Joseph's lost at the buzzer. I didn't get home to South Jersey until about a little after 1 a.m., and then I had to be at the Philadelphia airport around 6 a.m. for my flight to Pittsburgh. Needless to say, I wasn't very rested or energetic. When I left campus that Friday afternoon, I really thought that I would not make it to the next round of interviews. But as with many unexpected events in life, the search firm called me the first thing Monday morning and said that I did great and that they wanted me back for the next round. I thought, is this the delayed April Fool's joke? I mean, this didn't seem real. So when I came back for my subsequent interviews, though, I was much more prepared and well rested. I began to really explore all the information I could get on the university and reviewed over and over in my mind what was discussed in my interviews and my meetings. By the time I came back for my final interview, I think there was 3 or 4 interviews altogether, I'd become very excited with this opportunity because I clearly sensed that there was an energy level and optimism by the faculty, staff, students, and board members to really move the university forward. It just had to figure out the what and the how this was going to be done and who the next president would be to successfully lead the effort. In preparation of my final interview, I had developed an outline of an initial university strategic plan that I would explore if I were named the next president, some of which built on RMU's past strengths and others that would take the university in new directions. This outline covered things like expanding beyond the historic transactional approach to an RMU education to one that's more transformational. Maintaining the professional focus has always been the heart and soul of the university, and with strong student outcomes, but make the overall experience for students more holistic that provides a greater emotional connection for the students and broader personal development opportunities for students. Also, we want to move more towards a residential campus as opposed to a commuter school. We want to enhance the campus to be more of a living learning environment, which included greater emphasis on student life. Raise the bar academically by pursuing new program accreditations and ensure that we maintain our current accreditations. Enhance the attractiveness, functionality, and growth of the campus and its facilities. Leverage the brand of the university with particular emphasis on the academic programs, personal attention, student outcomes, price, the tuition levels, the full college experience, and the success of our Division I athletics programs. Wanted to strengthen the whole teacher-scholar model used by our faculty, to have them be active scholars, but also to be able to engage students in that and have that impact on their teaching as well as their own research. And put more emphasis and increased resources in the two major revenue-generating areas of the university, enrollment management and institutional advancement, which covers fundraising, alumni relations, marketing, and PR. Those were two initial areas. As a tuition-dependent institution, we had to make sure that we had those revenues coming in. Now, many of you were not here then, particularly the students, but there was one other big issue hanging out there that had to be factored in and addressed very early in my tenure as president, and that was the medical school idea. In fact, when I was interviewing, I was told, in by about my third interview, I believe, that, oh, by the way, Greg, we're going to do a medical school at Marsh University. What do you know about medical schools? Well, as I picked myself off the floor, I said, well, I really don't know anything, other than every friend of mine who is at a university as a medical school usually wants to get rid of it as fast as they can. But I'm willing to learn, and I'm a real trooper. But I started asking questions about how it was structured and how it was going to be paid for and so forth. And it really was not a well thought out process at that point in time. So we began doing our work. We did our due diligence. We did our researching and doing planning. We actually moved forward. But it became very apparent as we were moving forward, we had this split between the ability to fund a medical school and at the same time do all the other things I outlined that I thought were important for the university to move forward. And in fact, as we got more and more knowledge about the medical school and the accreditation process and what the requirements were, we quickly realized the costs were beginning to really maximize and increase dramatically. And that was really not part of the original, the accreditation process previously. So we were sort of finding out things that were rather shocking and disconcerting, because we knew this was going to be a major drain in the university if we went forward in both of those different arenas. So, make a long story short, about a year and a half later, I had to make a very, very tough call, and I had to recommend to the board of trustees, and particularly when the board leadership was actually very much behind the medical school idea, I had to make a very strong recommendation that we abandon the plan to do the medical school. It would just not work out financially, culturally, and so forth for the university. And that was, I could have actually ended my career at that point in time and moved back to Philadelphia, but the board unanimously supported my position on that. And it was a well thought out one, obviously with all the support of my senior management team and putting together a very, very convincing argument as to why we really should not move forward at that time. So that allowed us then to really springboard into the next phase of our plan, and that was, let's do a strategic plan. I was mentioned in the opening remarks. We did a first university-wide strategic plan, which led to the mission statement. It led to the core values. It led to a campus master plan. It eventually led to the campus branding program with the Changing Lives concept. It led to the capital campaign that helped fund a lot of those initiatives. All those things have been really successful and extremely helpful in advancing RMU. Let me offer some of the highlights that came out of that, and really that plan and what's moving into the new plan right now. Now, it's always dangerous when you do something like this, because it means you're going to leave certain things off. And so I'm not going to address all the highlights, and I'm not going to mention, the ones I'm mentioning are not in any particular order of importance or time sequence, but I just want to kind of give the audience a little sense of all the things that we've gone through. Because I think, again, many students who were not here back then many times have no idea of what we actually did. First of all, we want to focus on the infrastructure. And the university had grown quite a bit programmatically before I got here. My predecessor, Ed Nicholson, had done a wonderful job in really taking the university from just a business school only and adding programs and then adding schools, going from one school to 5 schools. And so that was undergraduate programs, that was master's programs, that was some doctoral programs as well. So the university had grown significantly programmatically, which also meant adding faculty, adding staff, adding just people. And usually when you go through that, this is not uncommon in universities, the most costly aspect of that kind of transformation of a university are the facilities. And that was the piece that really had not kept up. And so classrooms and dorms and other offices and other facilities really were lagging quite a bit. And even the ones we had here were not in great shape. So we knew we had to really focus on that. Well, to kind of looking at the first 4 years or so, one of the things we decided to do, and this was also rather controversial, was we sold our 2 buildings downtown. And again, for the students who are not here then, Robert Morris University used to really be known for our building, our main building downtown, which is where we got most of our start. And we had another little building as well that housed our Bear Center for Nonprofit and some of our media arts program. So we first sold the smaller building to Duquesne University. It's right in their back door. And then we eventually sold the bigger building. And that had a lot of emotional ties to a lot of alumni, obviously, who that was their education, was that building downtown. And we did make the tough call because it made sense economically, it made sense strategically for the university and where we saw the university going. So we sold those, and that allowed us to generate some revenue that we could put back onto this campus here in Moon. And it really began the beautification and the new buildings on campus and the upgrading of campuses. What we really wanted to do was, going back to that transformative experience I talked about, we wanted to create a greater sense of place on this campus. We wanted to create a greater sense of community on this campus, and facilities really played a critical role in that regard. So you saw changes came to Nicholson Center with the creation of Romo's. We moved student life out. Many people don't know where student life used to actually be in Romo's. We moved John downstairs, different areas of the university. We moved the bookstore. We moved the missions. The missions used to be over in Benjamin Rush, way back in the campus, which was horrible. You know, people come on campus, well, where's your missions office? Well, you go way in back in some little square building there. Inside wasn't bad, but it's still, you really want your missions office to sort of be front and center on the campus, and we made that change by moving that over into a missions office. And we create the Heritage Room. And so many of you heard me tell the story about the Heritage Room, but quickly, we got the head of Robert Morris. I got a call one day in my office where a woman who ran an art gallery in Georgetown called up and said, I have Robert Morris's head. And we said, oh, okay. And do you want it? It's yours if you want it, but you got to come down and get it. And what it was actually, it was the mold used to build the statue in Philadelphia of Robert Morris. So Dave Jameson was going down to a conference. He was the dean at the time, going down to a conference. Said, David, go down to Georgetown and bring me Robert Morris's head. And he did. And by the way, they threw his arm in too. We have his arm, if you remember. So Dave brought it back. He said, what do I do with it now? I said, I don't know. Put it in your office. We'll figure it out later. So Robert Morris's head sat on Dave's floor for a long time. And we eventually, since it was just a mold, it really wasn't bronze or anything, so we actually had to treat it so it had a more sturdy look to it. But we said, so we have his head. What do we do now? Well, what else do you do with the head? You build a room for the head. And that's what we did. And that's where the Heritage Room came into play. But it was very, very apparent, because I know when I first came here, and people always say, well, who's Robert Morris? And we go through the whole spiel of who Robert Morris is. And so if I said, well, let's create, now we have his head, let's create a nice stand for it, and we have documents that he signed, and let's tell people, here's the history of Robert Morris. So when they ask, say, go to that nice room over there and read stuff, and you'll know. And that's how the Heritage Room came into play. We had a new food court eventually in Nicholson, although I don't think we had enough TVs on campus, so we have to do more flat screen TVs in Nicholson, because I can't trip over anymore. We had additional food areas created in Hale, Wheatley, and Yorktown, obviously. We upgraded fitness centers on campus. By the way, I should mention, for those students in the room, when I first got here, Jefferson was basically a storehouse. I mean, there was nothing in it. It was packed junk in there that facilities used. And so I said, well, we got a building on campus. It's a pretty good-sized building. Why don't we use it? Well, we got problems, there's asbestos here and this and that. And so I said, well, let's knock it down. Well, no, we can't do that, because if we do that, it's going to cost a lot of money. Then you got environmental issues. So I said, well, it seems like a sin having one of the original buildings on campus sitting there just being used for storage. So we eventually came up with a plan, and we found out eventually that the asbestos was not as bad as it originally thought, and that's when we were able to create the vet center and the computer lab, and upstairs with the fitness center and those rooms. And so that was good. That came to life. That was not being used at all. And again, as campus was beginning to grow, that became very important. So those were very important. They had those kinds of fitness areas for our students and places for students to kind of hang out a little bit. Sidewalks and cascading stairs. Everybody knows my fetish for sidewalks and cascading stairs. Used to be, for students, you used to have to walk in the road, and that meant, by this point in time, I'd probably run over about 50 students. There were no stairs along campus, so think about all the hillsides that you go down. And it was actually sport for us to watch students just slide down hills because it was really pretty dangerous. But that's where it was behind, particularly the dorms there and those areas. We felt it was really important, and it's just added to the campus. Obviously, landscaping became very important. More parking, and believe me, there is more parking. There's not a parking problem on this campus; there's a walking problem, and we actually have more spaces. Everybody wants to park right in front of their building. I understand that. There's hills on this campus. I understand that, but we do have more parking spaces. And a lot of that was created, but we were able to move the softball field. Softball field is actually up near the football stadium originally, and we were able to move that. That's where parking is right now. Obviously, we had new and renovated residence halls. Benjamin Rush building was converted from, as I said, admissions to nuclear medicine. Business school obviously is new. Wheatley Center is new. Nursing and health sciences is going up right now. We've done library upgrades and other areas. Space downtown. We did rent downtown space. We still rent downtown space because we really want to still have a presence in the city. And at the Heinz 57 Center, we're the Bear Center for Nonprofit Management, and some other programs. We offer some courses there. We enhanced Sewell Center and the men's and women's basketball locker rooms, coaches' offices, and so forth. We've done changes and upgrades to the Island Sports Center. Since 2006 and 2007 to present, we have invested approximately $184 million in capital projects covering both strategic and routine capital needs of this campus. Long overdue. There's still more to be done, but that really made a major dent in the progress of the university. Today, we really see, from my first drive on this campus with Dan Keener on April 1st, 2005, I saw it was an attractive campus. It had potential. But when you got behind the walls, when you got behind the buildings, it wasn't as pretty and as functional as we'd like to be. And so the transformation has allowed us to go from being the campus being sort of a plus to now being truly a competitive advantage for us. And we hear more and more positive comments, particularly from the admissions folks, when they tell us when they get a student on campus or prospective student, there's no doubt that we'll probably get them. Also, the academic accreditations. We added new accreditations in business school, education school, nursing program, nuclear med, actuarial science, and healthcare simulation. And obviously, we do reaccreditations in both engineering and computer science because we had those accreditations already. And of course, we do the university-wide ones, middle states, and even NCAA. So we've had great accreditations all across the board, knock on wood. You never know what's going to happen in the future, but we've had wonderful outcomes in all those areas. Growth of the full-time academically qualified faculty. Since 2007, we have increased the full-time faculty from 174 to about 225 full-time faculty. We witnessed the first ever faculty Fulbright scholars at the university. While they've been employed at the university, some people had other Fulbrights before they got here, but the three faculty members, which we're very proud. Steve Foreman went to Ukraine in 2008. Dr. Phil Harrell went to Germany in 2010, and Dr. Connie Rusick went to England in 2014. That's a beginnings of a trend that we'd like to see continue. That just says how our faculty are well respected in the field. We implemented, little things, but they're very important things that I was surprised we didn't do. Things like the annual faculty and staff awards, as well as employee service recognition awards. The idea of recognizing top performance, top longevity, top commitment to the university is very, very important. It's important that we celebrate our accomplishments, both university-wide, but also based on individual accomplishments. Growth of new academic programs and academic partnerships, including a number of new integrated 5-year bachelor MS programs. They were really not much in existence before I got here, and the deans and Provost Jameson have done a great job in moving those forward. Enrollment, you heard the numbers before, but we actually have, our enrollment increased by approximately 600 students in that time period. We went from about 4,900 students to about 5,500 students total today across all undergrad, master's, and doctoral. That's not only have we increased the number of students, but the mix of students has changed dramatically. Back, again, around 5, we had many more part-time students, but today we have many more full-time students. So we look at the student credit hours attached, that number has exploded. In fact, since 2005, we've actually enrolled a total of 15,000 new students in the university. The growth of international students now studying at RMU, which is more than 400, has been a major change, and a significant increase in the number of our domestic students who have at least one international educational experience. We've talked about student engagement. That really has changed things dramatically, and we're seeing more and more of that activity, not just students satisfying the requirements, but like 2 years ago, we had 7 students receive the Renaissance Award, and that being those students who do all 7 of the engaged categories. This class is going to graduate in a couple weeks. 57 students are receiving the Renaissance Awards. So not only are they doing their share, but they're doing a lot. And that just shows a very active, committed, involved, engaged student body. Implemented a number of student awards as well, such as the Transformation Awards, Student Excellence Awards, Presidential Undergraduate Awards, Global Engagement Awards. We give all those this week, so I know we're doing those. I speak at all those. But they are, again, the idea of we should not be afraid, we should not shy away, we should actually seek out the way to celebrate individual achievements and accomplishments. It's part of the higher education world, and I didn't think we were doing enough of it before I got here. Growth of the honors program in terms of numbers and quality of students. We had 83 students in the honors program in 2007. Last year we had 199 students with SATs of 1250 or more. And the activities and the outcomes and the creation of the Honors Student Center, we have 2 honors residents now, so it really has made the honors program be much, much more vibrant and with a lot more substance attached to it. Student retention and graduation rates. And this is when you really think about, these are some major accomplishments for us. Our student retention, and this is what we measure this by, the students going from freshman to sophomore year. That's the way higher education usually measures retention. And we went from about 73% of our freshmen becoming sophomores here to 84%. And that may not seem like a lot to people, but if you don't understand, that's, usually you can tell what your retention rates are going to be, because a lot of it is based on sort of the socioeconomic background of our students and the kinds of academic profiles of our students. And you can actually project or create models of what percent you think are bad based on the characteristics and demographics of your students. And when you looked at our demographics of our students, that 73% we were getting it back in 2006 was actually about where we should be. But we felt that we probably we could do a lot of things to grow that, even if we didn't change the demographics of our students that much. And in fact, going from that 73 to 84%, that 84% now puts us in a category of schools that are pretty competitive schools. And our goal is to get that even higher. And I really want to commend everybody in the university for making that happen. As I always tell the senior management of my team, we're all development officers, we're all enrollment officers in the university, and we're all retention officers in the university. We all have those responsibilities. And again, things like retention and graduation rates don't happen by chance. They really require a whole committed approach by everybody involved in the university. And we've seen improvement in our graduation rates, going from 53% to 62% for 6-year graduation rates. That's the way the government measures it. And we've actually started to see now our 4-year graduation rates are beginning to inch up, given the nature of our students that are coming in. This year, we created the new Center for Innovation in Teaching and Directed Engaged Learning, Citadel, which I think is long overdue to help with the pedagogy, but also tying the engaged learning into faculty's teaching, and really becomes a holistic approach. We added logos. We didn't have an athletic logo when I got here. And we have, do along with our academic logos. Romo didn't exist. He'll be here for the next 50 years, I think, same guy. But I think he's a grandfather now, I think. But all that stuff came about early on because we really felt that we need those kinds of identities that schools like Robert Morris University, particularly those that are Division I athletic programs, really need to have. We talked about changing the residence halls, getting students living in the residence hall. And not only going up to that 53, 54% of our students from 30% range, but that meant also adding 800 beds in that time period, more than 800 beds. So when you look at the percent, that's one thing, but when you look at that percent increase is on top of 800 more beds as part of our denominator, you're talking about a pretty dramatic change in the culture of the university. And all the good things that come about from being a residential campus, we have seen in terms of student engagement, student involvement, academics, all those kinds of emotional connections that students have to the university. And when we see now juniors and seniors wanting to come back on campus, that tells us a lot. That it's not just having more beds and maybe some better beds, but it's the whole student life. It's the overall activities that students want to be here. It's important to be here. Even though many times you can live off campus, that's many times cheaper and not that far away, there is a pull to be on campus, and that's really exciting. I can't not state, though, we're also very strong management of the university from an operational standpoint. I've talked a lot about the students in the academic side, but one of the things that I first learned when I interviewed here, and people told me was, Greg, this university is different. They're very efficient. They're very business-like in the way we run our universities. And I said, yeah, everybody says that. Every university says we run like a business, and it's like the first thing from the truth. most universities can never figure out how to run anything efficiently. And so I figured, all right, that's a line they're giving me, and so I'll see. I have to say, I don't know whether it goes back to our business school origins and the way we've operated for years, but there is a sense of doing more with less and being as efficient and being as focused on what we do and doing it well. And that carries over to the operations side of the house as well as the academic side. So when you think about financial, facilities management, IT, legal, HR, vendor relations, contracts, risk management, these are things that I could truly say we are the leader in higher education. Even compared to some of the largest universities out there that have many more resources, that we really are pretty much at the head of the pack in this area. And again, as I always say, we don't have room to make errors. So we have to make darn sure decisions we make are pretty much on target. And then the successful development and implementation of the RMU Polling Institute. This is something I think I'd wanted to do from day one. Couldn't quite figure out how to do it. It wasn't always a top priority. But the Polling Institute, and you probably see us being mentioned in the press worldwide on the results of our Polling Institute, that, again, gets the Robert Morris University out there, and people know that there's interesting things going on. What's nice about that Polling Institute is that it's made up of a committee of faculty who generate the ideas for the poll, and many times it's tied back to their research. So when the poll is being publicized, and the press will call us up, everything from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and so forth, they'll have a faculty member they can call as the expert. And so you connect the faculty to the publicity. That was the key of that initiative. And then, of course, the national recognition we get from our athletic programs, particularly basketball and hockey, but all the programs. Men's and women's basketball programs really have begun to be consistently at the top of their conference and getting into the postseason. And we've all seen what that does in terms of name recognition as well as school spirit. Football and hockey have also had a taste of postseason play. Who could ever forget Kentucky game? In the following year, we beat St. John's, which is also was a great win. It wasn't as big as Kentucky being here, but it was also a great win for the program. This year, obviously, our win in the NCAA tournament, and then we moved on and we're upset by Duke. One of the things I think it really changed, though, is student life and student involvement in this campus has just exploded. And I can honestly say that was the one area that I knew was important. I knew it would take time. I did not think it would happen as quickly as it has. And everything from Greek life, student organizations, club sports, all just really this whole idea of the campus and student life. And John Michaelenko and his team have done a great job, but also partnering with other people in the university to make it all work. So that's really been a real pleasant surprise. Student outcomes continue to be very, very strong. That's what we've been known for, and that's something we'll never walk away from. Early adoption of the Yellow Ribbon program, for those who know, for our vets, to help our vets be able to afford to come to school here, and the creation of the vets program, but also the creation of the Vets Center in Jefferson. That was a critical piece of that strategy, because it's one thing to be able to give the vets money to come to school, but if anybody knows, if any vets in the room, they can attest to this. It's that idea of a unit and that idea of that camaraderie they need to be able to make the transition, particularly if you're coming out of a military a war zone, and then all of a sudden you find yourself sitting in a classroom in Hale. That's a real adjustment for anybody. And so without having the kind of support that you need, both from the administration, the faculty, but also from your fellow students who have been where you've been, that was very important. So that center, that really creates that sense of camaraderie. One of the newest programs we have here, and I'm really proud of this, and it came late in the process, but we were thinking about this, was the Women's Leadership and Mentorship Program. This is something that we see now. This year, the first year, we had about 22 female freshman students enrolled in the 4-year leadership and mentoring program, and that program is going to continue every year, and it has some very exciting aspects to it. A lot of support by internally as well as externally, and we're seeing that take off, and I think there'll be even better things down the road. Promoting greater multicultural awareness on this campus, diversity, inclusion, with the creation of the Office of Multicultural Student Services and Student Life, the President's Office of Diversity and Inclusion that reports to me, the Black Male Leadership Development Institute that was started by Dr. Rex Crawley, and it carries on that tradition along with the research end of that being USURI. So there's some very, very important and unique things that we're trying to address at the university, not just in terms of general multiculturalism and diversity, but trying to deal with some very specific problems that are facing not just Robert Morris University, but our society as a whole, and that being particularly the decline of the black male on college campuses. Opening a new health services clinic, a new counseling center on campus, both of which are staffed with additional professional and administrative personnel. As you know, the students can also attest to this, is that this is a very important component of what a university has to be able to offer. We are a microcosm of society, and the problems that we see in society, the challenges that people have for various reasons across all different areas are here on campus as they are in the general population, and we have an obligation, we have a responsibility to provide those services to our students and to others. The alumni events have begun to really generate much more interest, along with student life. This is the other thing that really has changed significantly. And I think it was probably about 4 years ago when we saw, if anybody's ever read the Tipping Point, this in my mind was the tipping point where all of a sudden we went from okay events on alumni homecoming weekends to, okay, to now, bang, it happened. Now, maybe it was tied to the fireworks at our first night football game on campus. We know how people in Pittsburgh love fireworks. But it really has changed things dramatically, and it just gets bigger and bigger every year. And it's obviously, it's the younger alums who have gone through this new kind of experience and have that more emotional connection, but it's also drawing in the more older alums. I always tell the story, and bear with me if you've heard this before, but it really was a moving moment for me, and that now 4 years ago, this tipping point, there was actually one incident that really reflected it for me, and that was we have two alums who graduated back in the 70s. One gentleman was from New Jersey, he still lives in New Jersey, and his roommate was from Virginia. And the day they graduate, they both left campus. The guy from Virginia has never stepped foot back on this campus, 40 years. The guy from New Jersey, he's been very involved with this. He comes back, he's a donor. His wife also went to Robert Morris University, so they have a real connection, and he's just a very active alum. Well, it was their 40th anniversary of their graduation that year. And every year, the guy from New Jersey calls his roommate up in Virginia and says, come back to homecoming. Nah, I ain't going back. My life's gone. I forgot Robert Morris years ago. So for this 40th year, he finally said, okay, probably got tired of his roommate calling him all the time. And so he came and said, I'll come back. And they left the wives home, and they sort of relived their college. They actually got a hotel room together, like they were living back in Gallatin. And they both played the tennis team when they were here. So they both got in the morning, played tennis on the courts up on the field. And God only knows what else they did as reliving their college days. But they show up at the event we have that afternoon before the game. And so the guy from New Jersey says, Greg, you got to meet my roommate. And so I meet him, and it was unbelievable. First of all, he was emotionally, so moved. He literally had tears in his eyes. He goes, Greg, I have not been back here 40 years. And when I left Robert Morris College, he goes, there was nothing here, absolutely nothing. Because I walk on this campus today, I can't believe this is my university. And he kept saying, my university. And so, it was that kind of change that you see a person go through that says, you know what, when someone who's that age, who's been that way that long, and can have that immediate kind of almost visceral experience, it tells us we're doing something right. And it tells us, students now, don't take for granted what you have. You're helping build this, and this becomes even more exciting, because someday you'll be 40 years out, sitting around, and hopefully coming back from your graduation. And God only knows what will be on this campus in 40 years. But it really does that emotional connection. But don't wait 40 years to do it. Stay involved every year out. We also successfully completed the university's first ever comprehensive capital campaign by reaching and surpassing our goal of $40 million to help pay for all the stuff we're doing. Online education has been launched and it's growing, especially for adult and non-traditional students, and we heard the numbers there. Bronze Bob makes it back home on campus. He's parked on a bench outside Franklin, and he'll be there hopefully forever and ever and ever. And that was obviously the generous gift of students and others who made that happen. And again, another thing that happened much faster than I thought it would happen. I thought that would be a nice addition to the campus. And changing lives. It's not just a university tagline. It really has an integral part of who we are as an institution and what we seek to do throughout every aspect of our experience at the university. And all the university's core values, academic excellence, professional focus, engaged learning, global perspective, individuals matter, as well as changing lives, have all become really well established and are being enhanced every single day. In many respects, I have to say, the creation and the success of the core values is, in my mind, one of the greatest highlights I can offer, and one of the ones I'm most proud of. As I've said before, when we create those back in 2006, 2007, when we were doing the strategic plan, and we kind of just came up with those, and we talked about them quite a bit. You always get fearful when you have those kinds of witty phrases, and they be somewhat generic in nature. People go, oh, that's nice, hang on a wall somewhere and walk away. I got to tell you, those core values clearly tapped into an underlying yearning for that kind of thing. 'Cause obviously, the university community, both those that had been here before and even those who were new, knew they gave us a vocabulary, I think, for the first time to say, this is who we are. We've always been this. And now we can actually talk to it and point to it and say that's the uniqueness of Robert Morris University. Because the way they were adopted from day one has been unbelievable. And so I think we all should be very, very proud of that. Okay, those are all the great things. Let me give you some of the biggest challenges that I faced. And not unlike all university presidents. Everything's relative in life. When people always ask me, what's my biggest challenge? What keeps me up at night? What's the most difficult part? And you can go through all the stuff during the day. You can be frustrated. You can deal with certain crazy issues like that. No. The biggest issue, without a doubt, is pure and simple money. I hate to be blunt, but it really is. It's the biggest challenge, not just facing Robert Morris University. It's the biggest challenge facing any university president. And what I mean by money is, the challenge is finding it, asking for it, raising it, using it effectively, keeping it safe, investing it wisely, defending allocations, charging and defending tuition, and challenging established notions about tuition levels and increases both internally and externally. Now, a big part of the problem with money issue is the business model that underlies American higher education. Now, I don't want to put you through a whole economics of higher education, but let me give you a feel for what I mean by that, because this really is the biggest challenge we all face. You face it in terms of paying tuition. We face it in terms of paying our bills, and how do we invest the university, particularly, again, as a university that's so tuition dependent as we are. Given the nature and structure and the purpose of a typical American university, whether it offers bachelor's, master's, or doctorate degrees, this is the challenge, the real cost of delivering the education that we give, or the degrees that we give, exceeds the price or the tuition that we can charge to our students. So for those of you who are business majors and those who are not business majors, if your costs are always going to exceed what you can charge for that product or that service, that's not a real good business model to start off with. You would never say, I want to be in the business of making money, and therefore I'm going to start a university. This is the reason why private universities always go through peaks and valleys throughout our history. Private universities, I'm going to say for-profit universities, don't last, because you cannot make money in this business, if you're going to do things appropriately, if you're going to do things with quality. For private nonprofit universities such as Robert Morris, Carnegie Mellon, Harvard, Stanford, Duquesne, Carlow, etc., the whole range, we have to fill the gap between the revenue generated by student tuition, and what I mean by that really net tuition, which I'll explain, and our annual operating costs, as well as our capital costs with non-tuition revenue in the form of fundraising, gifts, research, grants, government grants, and other appropriations and other auxiliary revenue sources. So that's why when you have that gap between your costs and your tuition, that gap has to be filled by those other non-tuition dollars. That's why we do fundraising. That's why we do government grants, research grants, seek out gifts, and have food plans that hopefully will generate some revenue for the university, housing that hopefully generates some revenue for the university, and other areas. And periodically having to borrow money, just like you'd borrow personally, whether it be a loan for your car or whether you put a mortgage on your house. The degree in which a private nonprofit university can consistently generate non-tuition revenue, meaning larger and larger endowments that contribute more and more to the operating costs, the less pressure there is on raising tuition. That's a reality. Conversely, when you don't have greater non-tuition revenue, your endowment's small, there will be more pressure on cost cutting and tuition increases. But there are limits on how far a university can go in terms of cutting its costs as well as raising its tuition. That's the challenge that most institutions have. Now, this is a good time to go back to my reason why I told you that story in the very beginning about the endowment with the board in my interview, those who were for it and those who were against it. This is why that debate was so interesting and actually disconcerting to me to think that the board was that not in agreement on an endowment. That was a real challenge. And that was something I knew I had to change if I became president and support the guy who's the board chair who said endowments are very important. And so the question is, do large endowments mean lower tuitions? Well, the answer is maybe, like everything in life. And what I mean by that is when you look at the list of tuition if students pay, the sticker price, no, it usually doesn't have much impact on that. But what it will have impact on is the net tuition. And that's the sticker price or the stated tuition minus whatever institutional aid we give you. And most of you get some sort of university institutional aid. So it's the actual price you actually pay. That's what we call the net tuition in the university. There, it does have an impact. Let me give you an extreme example. This is why the world's not fair. Harvard has the largest endowment in higher education. Harvard's endowment today is about $36 billion, billion, versus the median private university endowment of $26.2 million. That's an M. RMU's endowment today is about $33 million. So Harvard has $36 billion. Now, most universities, like you do if you invest your own money, you don't take out, you don't want to touch the principal every year. You want to invest it, you want it to grow. So you withdraw a smaller percent, then hopefully you're getting in return on your investments. So most universities, usually in the 4 to 5%, they'll withdraw each year from their endowment to help fund their operations. So let's use 5%, for example, with Harvard. Do the math. 5% of $36 billion, that's how much money they can help cover their operating costs. In fact, if they wanted to, every student at Harvard University would go for free if they want to use it. But Harvard has a program. Their list of tuition and fees is $44,000 a year. With room and board, it comes to about $59,000 to go to Harvard. Endowment covers approximately 40% of its annual operating budget, their entire operating budget, their endowment covers. RMU, our endowment covers about between 1% and 2% of our operating budget. At Harvard, any students whose family income is less than $65,000 a year goes for free to Harvard. And on a sliding scale, up to family incomes of 150. Stanford, who has the second largest endowment, couldn't be outdone. Their endowment's $21.4 billion. Just announced that anyone whose family income is less than $125,000 a year goes tuition free. And those with family incomes of less than $65,000 have their room and board for free as well. And their tuition is about $45,000. And when you add the other costs, about $62,000. So those schools having those levels of endowments, even though they fund other major parts of the university, a lot of the research stuff, a lot of their professorships are endowed and so forth, they can put a large portion of the money to make it for lower income. And $125,000 family income is not low income, but for Harvard and Stanford it is considered, and those students can go pretty cost efficiently. So that's the challenge. And schools that are more in our category, that's where we become very, very difficult. State institutions are also able to use direct state subsidies to help cover their portion of their operating costs, allowing them to keep their tuitions lower. And they have their own problems now as states are putting less and less money towards their education for their public systems. The fastest growing budget item for most private universities, including Robert Morris University, is what? Financial aid. That's our fastest growing segment of most universities' budgets. RMU today, we spend approximately $41 million on institutional aid that we give right back to students. That comes right out of our revenue that we get. So you give us $1, we give you 41 cents back. That's the way it works. And that $41 million that we put in institutional aid is on a total annual budget of about $125 million. So it's a big chunk of that budget. So that's where things are. So the key is to increase your endowment, continue controlling and reallocating your cost, and aligning tuition increases with the university value proposition. That's what I think about every single minute of every day. And those things. That's why it's really important to really be managing those costs, but also be able to raise the non-tuition revenue dollars, again, to make education as affordable for our students as possible. And we pride ourselves on being one of the more affordable private universities in Pennsylvania. I mentioned value proposition, and this is what I think it's all about. And this is what I'd like to see us talk more about in our society when we talk about the rising cost of education. Because it really does come back. You think about education, many people, and I understand it comes down to ability to pay quite often, but it also is probably the biggest investment you're going to make in your own life, or your family's going to make in your life, other than maybe a house. But it's really going to become the major investment. And that's the point, looking at it as an investment, not just an expense. You're investing in your human capital, in your advancement. And so if you look at it in those terms, then you're saying, okay, for this investment I'm making at Robert Morris University for my education, what's the value? What's the return on that investment? And what are all the things that go into that analysis of the return on the investment? And that's what we talk about more and more, the value proposition. What makes that tuition you pay here worth it? And when we talk about that, we really begin to narrow it down, the strength of our academic programs, the holistic student experience, the changing lives piece, and what all that brings. A talented, caring faculty and staff that live the vision, the mission, and the core values. Student outcomes upon graduation is the easiest one to measure, and making sure we still have those kinds of placement rates, and not just placement rates, but placing students in areas that they're interested in, that they want to pursue their careers. Managing our growth in a responsible way, the programming, the faculty, the enrollment, the facilities, the infrastructure, student support services, athletics, all those things being done in a progressive way, but also in a managed way. A safe and well-maintained campus. Expanding the RMU experience to impact on alumni, professional engagement. And now we're talking about this new idea of personal fulfillment over one's lifetime. You'll hear more about that. We talk about the Gallup Index and what we're trying to do, not just prepare you for your first job, but prepare you for a life of professional engagement and personal fulfillment. Now, ever since I announced that I was leaving RMU, people have been asking me what has been the most exciting event during my time at the university, or what I am most proud of accomplishing. And picking one or even many is impossible. But of course, I never forget certain things. Obviously, I mentioned a lot of these things already, but beating Kentucky, getting the accreditations, AACSB was always a challenge for us. We got that. The actuarial science program took off, and that's been well recognized by the Society of Actuaries. The student engagement program and the transcript has been a major success. The growth of our academic programs, the focus on the students, that has really been a key. Both your performance, your involvement, your engagement, your retention and graduation rates, your outcomes, but your overall experience. Making it as a special place for you. And in my remarks at commencement on Saturday, on the 9th, I talked quite a bit about this, and hopefully what we've been able to impact on you in that regard. So that's one of the areas I kind of split from this presentation. Becoming more residential campus was clearly a key part of that whole situation. I should also point out when the board thought they really hired a crazy person from Philadelphia when they first hired me. Because my very first board meeting, I walked in there. First, I had this medical school issue I got to deal with, and I keep on kind of kicking that to the side. But I laid out the demographics, and the demographics in our society. We look at demographics like religion. Because we look at how many high school graduating seniors are going to graduate, because that tells us what the pool of potential students are every year, and what kind of students and where they're coming from, what kind of high schools, what part of the regions of the country. And so we knew, the entire country knew, that come 2010, 2011, we're going to see nationwide a dramatic decline in the number of high school graduating seniors. And then when you looked at Western Pennsylvania, basically it went off a cliff. And when you looked at Allegheny County in the 5-year, it went even more. So we're going to be fighting for a shrinking pool of students. And Pitt's not going to go anywhere, CMU's not going to go anywhere, Duquesne's not going to go anywhere. We're all going to be vying for a smaller pot of students. So I laid that all out. And I talked about the cost and all that. Everything I laid out was like, oh my God, do we close up tomorrow or today? And then I say, in the next breath I say, okay, now I want to invest millions of dollars by building, I want to renovate all these old dorms, I want to build new dorms, I want to add this, I want to expand this, I want to do this. And they're all going, wait a minute, you just told us we're going down the drain 1 minute, and now you say you want to invest in all these things. And by the way, the only segment of the higher education market that's actually growing is the adult market. And by the way, I want to get out of the downtown. I want to become much more undergraduate focused, traditional students. So they're saying, oh, well, this guy is nuts. Maybe he should have stayed at the basketball game in New York. I don't know. So I said, but here's my point. I said, we should have done this years ago, but we didn't. But we have some great things going for us. The professional focus of our programs is going to be a winner. It's always been a winner, but it's going to become even more so. And the way our students are very actively involved, the internships and the other kinds of applied experiences they get, the relationship they have with our faculty, those are all really powerful things. We're going for accreditations. We have some. We're going to get AACSB. We'll get nursing. We'll get education. We're going to get those. We have Division I sports here. We have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle that other schools would die for, but we've already made those investments. What we don't have is we never create that transformative college experience. We never put it all together. It was almost as if the university was giving up on the traditional model because they felt it was going to be tough. We didn't really have a strong hold in it, and so why would we invest in it? And that's where I had to stick my neck out, and I really felt that we could pull this off. Now, sometimes it's my ego, and sometimes I walked away and said, I hope I'm right, because if I'm not right, man, I'm in trouble. But it was this idea, we have to take advantage of what our strengths are, and our strengths were very apparent to me going back to that initial outline I had in the strategic plan. And so the board, to their credit, said, okay, let's run with it, and let's figure out how to pay for it. Let's how to fund it. Let's how to obviously gradually build into it. And we did that. And that's what we've done in the last 10 years. And I have to tell you, it's been very successful. Particularly when you think about, and you always hate to, sort of puff yourself up at the expense of your colleagues who are really suffering, but there are a lot of schools out there like Robert Morris University that are having major problems. They have not made those adjustments. They have not made those investments. They're not really looking at all the detail that we've been looking at and trying to create that experience for the students. So they really have that, like I said, that transformative college experience, but also has the great outcomes attached to it. You can do both. We can provide you that kind of holistic experience that most smaller liberal arts schools have always prided themselves on, and that's how they've always sold themselves. And they've always looked at that professional focus that we've had as being something we don't do. Well, I've never bought that argument, and to me that's always been a false argument. Are you liberal arts or are you professionally focused? No, you're both. You've got to prepare people for their first job, and you got to prepare people for a lifetime of change and so forth. And we've been figuring out how to do that going along, and I think we do that tied to the personal touch, those core values that I think brought everything together. That's what's allowed us to do that, and I think we're doing very well. I still don't sleep well at night. We still have to worry about moving forward, but we do that. And the results have been, we've stabilized and we've actually grown the enrollment, particularly among the full-time undergraduate students, with higher SATs, higher grade point averages, so the quality of students has increased. When I got here, we had an average SAT of a little bit lower than 1,000. Today we're about almost pushing 1060. And that's, again, the range has broadened a little bit, but we're still moving in the area of increasing more and more talented students without giving them more and more financial aid. Building and updating the campus was key to that. Division I sports I mentioned, and it really has just, all these things have come together very, very nicely. Let me just kind of conclude. I need to say that we can never rest on our laurels, and I hope whoever the next president is, he or she continues, and obviously the person will have new ideas and new directions. But I think there's enough of the fundamentals here that we started that are working that I think will continue. I can tell you, people always ask me, well, what's the next president going to do? I said, I have a famous idea. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. But I can tell you the board of trustees has really bought into what we're doing. They're really behind, and I think a lot of things you would not see dramatic change. Hopefully the person will add on to it and make it even stronger and enhance it. That's one of the things I really wanted to do when I came here was nothing's worse when a new president walks in and says, everything you're doing is wrong, now you're going to do it my way. No, I really wanted to, I spent the first couple of months finding out what do we really do well here and what's really worked here and what's below the surface. Forget the spin, forget the PR, forget the marketing stuff. What do we really do? And as I talked to more and more people, it came back to that personal experience, that applied approach, the relationship with faculty, and the great outcomes, and the professional focus of our programs. Okay, that's what we do well. That's a given. It's here. How do we build on that? And how do we expand on that? And hopefully the next president will say, okay, what do you do well now? What path are you on? And so, okay, let's build on top of that. And that's what I think is going to be very, very important. So one last thing I will mention, going back to that question, what is a university president like? CEO? 19th century warden? A political warden? No. I'm a city mayor. Even though we're not elected by all our voting members in this city called Robert Morris, I'm appointed by the Board of Trustees. The other stakeholders, faculty, staff, students, alumni, friends of the university, et cetera, have a fair amount of influence over whether or not I stay appointed or I'm reappointed. You have a real impact on that. And that's very common in universities. Our Marsh University City is a vibrant community that includes buildings where people go to work every day. People live here. They sleep here. They eat here. They receive services. They come here for entertainment. We have roads. We have parking lots. We have sidewalks. Not many, but we have sidewalks. We have lawns and we have fields, all of which have to be maintained and upgraded. In addition to providing a wide range of social and personal services for employees, students, residents, and visitors, we have a public safety department. I have my own police force to serve and protect our community. Given that we compete with many other cities, other universities, we have to make sure that we provide all the important attributes and services needed to attract as many members of our community as desired. And it's not enough just to provide the important attributes and services, but we must also do them exceptionally well and at a reasonable cost. To pay for all these attributes and services, we must tax certain members of our community in the form of tuition and fees charged to participate in the community. Of course, as in society in general, members of the community would love to have lower taxes, but still receive all the important attributes and services. That's how the Tea Party came into existence. The key is to find the right balance between the value of being part of this city and the level of taxes people are willing to pay, and in many cases, able to pay. In making these decisions, and all the decisions that impact on the value of our city, as mayor, one cannot be autocratic and make all the decisions unilaterally. Otherwise, this mayor may be impeached or not reelected by the board. By the same token, the mayor needs to provide a vision, get input from other members of the community, be persuasive in gaining support for strategies needed to fulfill the mission, and lead the efforts to obtain all the resources needed to fulfill that vision. This is exactly the job of a university president. So, for those of you who are old enough to remember Ed Koch, who was the mayor of New York City back in the 70s and 80s, he used to walk the streets of the city and wave to the people passing by and shout out, "So, how am I doing?" You can imagine what people in New York City shouted back. Well, as I prepare to leave the university after 10 years as president, and if I walked around the campus over the next 2 months during my time here and asked the same questions to the students, faculty, staff on the streets of our city, the campus, I'd be happy to get half as many people yell back, "Thumbs up, Mr. Mayor, thumbs up." With that, thank you very much, and I wish you all the very, very best.